So the weather cleared up, but we have the bridges are still out, and the Confederates are launching attacks here and here. Let me go in there too. I'm hoping I don't need to fight there, but the idea here is to try to penetrate through. Now, by declaring the attack, I've shown I've got a real unit there, but we can retreat before combat with this. It's a cav unit. It can declare it's retreating before combat. I think if it sticks around, it'll go away, and we get our combat marker here. This had to be a real unit to declare. That showed some information, and now we have the two battles. The fight at Gaines Mill starts to develop. We have something kind of interesting here, which is that the Union forces are known, and they could have slipped some dummies into there, but they don't have any available. They wanted them for other things. They're seeing the cost for that, which is one extra dummy would allow them to put it in the line and not make it clear where their leader is. Being clear where their leader is meant that Jackson could make a pretty good guess. And there could have been a foolery in there, but that would hurt the Union more. However, there's not going to be a leadership advantage here, and the Confederates are going to get one over on the wing. Turns a half day long each. That creates something kind of weird. The system was devised with turns being a day long each. By making them a half turn each, first of all, there's not 2 combat rounds in a day. But what it means is, what usually is the time when you can restructure your forces is on a daily basis. So there's a battle going on here that's been going a couple of days. I don't remember when it started. Most battles don't last more than 3 days, so it looks like there's capacity to stick around for longer than that in a way that may be a little unreasonable. But that battle normally under the system would have 2 rounds in which your reserve could come in to fortify either wing, but you can't actually move between the wings until the day is over. So you get 2 battle rounds with 1 enforcement. Here, because of the way the turn record chart is, spread out to cover 2 turns per day, you end up with this weird capacity to reorganize your wings structure midday. Is that incredibly telling? No, I mean, it's believable that you could reorganize a little bit. I don't find it a terrible difference, If I was judging this game just on its own, I would have no issue with it. But judging it within the series, one of the decisions in the series was to freeze the wings for both rounds in a day. Here, the 2 rounds in a day are done on different turns, so you can completely reorganize what's where. And there's nothing particular about this situation that makes that more applicable than in the other games in the series. So it's kind of a weirdness there. By the way, there's another game in the series I wasn't aware of. I kind of went looking for it and found the wrong thing and ordered it. I ended up ordering Summer Storm because it looked so interesting, but along with its expansion. But there's one on Gettysburg, on the Gettysburg campaign as well. So there are 2 of them I'm looking for. I had forgotten about that one. I had subscribed to it, but because I had never seen it. And it has a different box art, so it's a little different looking. But it is the same system. I noticed on Judd Vance's, one of the few lists that's kind of highly rated that has this game on it. It also had the rest of the series. So, I'm assuming he liked the series enough to pick it all up. I remember him being positive about it. And I sure the hell can see why. It's a fun system. The Union is winning the battle at Gaines Mill right now, which is kind of surprising. The die rolls have been very bad for the Confederates overall. This was a 6 over on this table, and then they failed to do any damage. So they took 2 hits here to none, and here they took 2 to 1. So this turn they took like 4 to 1 on that. That has skewed the victory conditions thing. Maybe the Union can afford to withdraw when the river clears, and start their process back and kind of go for a draw. On the other hand, maybe I can hold a defensive line down here. That's going to be hard, though, because if I let the Confederates get control of the river, I had better blow some of these bridges, and then they can build corduroy bridges. The river line, I can't hold it without troops, you know. And as long as the Confederates have, overall control here, the Union can't cut through here because they'd have to bust through here to do it. And if I can bust through there, I can go for Richmond. And so I'd have to leave, garrisons to protect my way, or else trace way up here. There's no way the Union can cut a big trace off. So I could actually send Jackson continuing around. And casualties over here at, what is this? White's Tavern. Are also, this is a battle that's kind of developing with the Confederates throwing to the rest of more of Magruder into play, and the rest of or all of Longstreet into play there, because they were outnumbered before. Well, they're still slightly outnumbered. You can see, at least when you start counting in the Union artillery on defense. So we didn't get great results out of that, and instead what we ended up doing was taking a 1-point loss net. This was 1-1. I may have already spoken about that. That was a 1-point advantage to the Union. I don't remember if it was 1-0 or 2-1. What's interesting here is the Union still have their mobility tick on them. Now, there's too many Confederate forces for the Union to just push through here and, make their way to here. But they could go into here. However, whatever they do, the Confederates may have the capability to make it to here. That looks like it's actually further from here and no closer or no further from this. So they may be able to launch an attack there. So both sides have some flexibility as to where they want this fight to develop. Clearly, what's going on right now is not particularly good for the Confederates, or for the Union for that matter. The Union need to get their forces into a position. Well, here's the thing. If I let the Union out, or the Confederates out of here, or if they head out of there on their own, I've got to do something about that in terms of covering this side. If I leave here, or even mostly leave here, or even don't leave here, the Confederates have a capability to push out of there. Actually, they could get here, they couldn't go here. The blockage rules are kind of weird in this. They remind me of some of the old World War I games, but it is a workable mechanism. If the enemy has a big enough line there, he can't hold you from cutting through. So yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. We'll see. We'll see what the Union chooses to do. But this was not a particularly valuable turn for the Confederates. They basically lost a little bit in the attrition fight. Really a really painful situation for the Union, because they can't pull these guys out yet. They can do a withdrawal motion next time. That'll get them here, and then they can fall back to Savage Station and kind of disengage fairly cheaply. Of course, then they're doing a withdrawal in combat, and that's got its own pains, but probably less than an attack would involve in this terrain. So that's my way out. I had these two entrenched positions. I want to hold them. I have a lot of dummies back here that I'm probably going to remove from the map and use to confuse the issues further. I've got these forces here, which can kind of hold the Confederates to a draw, but there's Confederate infantry here that could cause me issues. Um, and I've got nothing really blocking them. I've got this one cav, the engineers are unimportant, and then some dummies. So that's all a problem. Let's see what the Union command roll is, see how much I get to move. If I can move a lot of things, one thing I could do is I could split this core. I'm probably not facing much here. Move somebody down in here, and move somebody down in here and wipe this out, and then put the Confederates in an ugly position where this 4 Mile church or whatever is exposed. And that's an entry point up to Richmond, and they can't afford to let me do that. And I get a whole bunch of units that I can move. So I think that's what I'm going to be aiming for. Assuming McClellan is somewhere reasonable. Oh, shit. This will cost me 2 to move, 3. Yeah, I can do it. And I do not have to launch an attack. Of course, that'll freeze these units, but I didn't attack last turn, so I can make my advance up into there. Sounds interesting. Okay, so this is what we're looking at now, the Union holding here. They're just going to stand there. I would like the flexibility from an attack. Gosh. But I really don't want to lose the little edge in victory points I'm getting. And then we're engaging one attack here. And that's going to be pretty much a blowout, because that's just like a brigade down there. Now, the danger of this is the Confederates, I believe, will be able to get to 7 Pines with their whole force and maybe break the entrenchment line. But I can't send my whole force down that way. That outflank is too dangerous. I'm going to have to do something about that. And the results of that battle are as bad as one would have expected. McLaws lost half his strength. He's ineffective, trying to withdraw. I was hoping to get out of there on the CIC table, but the Union did an assault, which I was allowed to do. Why? Which I was allowed to do because McClellan moved there. I moved him up here. He had to move here to even launch that attack. So, okay. And that put me, let's see, attacker's command. Assault versus withdrawal gave me a 2. And it was like 3 to 1, 19 to 5. So that's a defender hit. And then firepower was 2 more hits. I rolled a straggle check for McLaws as he leaves. He's going to fall back there, ineffective. He does get to keep his little CSA combat marker, and the Union has taken that space. The rivers are clear, and everything is looking happy and sunny right now. The fact that the rebels have to defend Richmond, it's an auto loss if they lose it, puts things in a very different perspective. They can't fiddle around trying to break these entrenchments. They have got to stop the Union from making it through. And their line's been extended. They're holding these 2 spaces. They can't give them up. They're going to have to fall back down to there. That still leaves room for the Union to start curving around. But that's not really something that McClellan isn't really capable of launching attacks all over the place. He has to kind of be close by for an attack to happen. So that is one factor in my favor. A factor in the Union's favor, though, is I could, heading back down, this is useless. I could move my boats in and use some fire support. So if I can get to here, a lot of goodness starts to happen. And if I can take this, then it becomes a question of, can I get my engineer down there, build a bridge, come around, grab this? Yeah, there's not enough time for me to start getting points for bombarding Richmond. So, all right. Well, good weather again, which is an interesting situation. The Confederates, trying to preserve their victory point lead, fall back. I pull Jackson out, want him to help covering Richmond. I've got Longstreet and Magruder basically positioned there, and I'm just pulling inward. If the Union wants to try to take Richmond, they can push forward. They can keep their units across the Chickahominy, because I am in the lead in victory points. I don't need to take any of their wagons. I just need to preserve things now. I can't risk Richmond, and I did not see any cleverness that gave me a huge advantage. But here's the thing, if Jackson crosses into here, that starts to create another dynamic where I have about equivalent forces along this line as the Union does. Now, granted, Fifth Corps can pull down, but by doing so, it's putting itself at risk. Now, the danger there, I could start moving towards Mechanicsville. However, we're talking McClellan here. He can't operate that way. He can't launch attacks all along his line the way Lee can. He's restricted to where he is for the attacks, basically. And the Union choice here. I had 4 commands total. I moved my wagons. That cost me 2. They're in their home base. Everything's all good. I won't be losing 5 victory points each for them. I did the double move from here and here. 1 into here. I couldn't run here and here, but I could go here and here. Yeah, because there's only one road here. Cav probe up here. Exposed some dummies that I thought were dummies, but it also gets me some cav on the wing. I sent my other cav here, but the big thing is I'm making this attack on 4 Mile Church. Now, this may not work well, but I sure the hell couldn't launch an attack here, and I want to put the pressure on, because if I can get this space, or largely gain it, then I'm really putting a threat on Richmond, and I'm forcing Jackson to move back to be continued. I'm forcing the Confederates into a more and more defensive position, and I might just end up in a situation where I'm able to do something of value. I don't know what, because I don't see how I'm going to get my victory points. I'm 2 points behind. I'm on the attack, and that's going to probably cost me more victory points. And I'm already here across the river. If I leave there, I lose 5 points. There's just nothing, other than taking Richmond or somehow coaxing the Confederates into an attack that is going to get me anything. At this point, it might be a very McClellan thing to say, you know what, I made my base change. I'm still on my line here. I'm okay. But I feel like he had to tighten his line and move into this space anyway. And, I think I outnumber the Confederates there. In fact, I kind of know I do. That just may not be enough. Some play with the Confederates. So, for example, here, yeah, I have 3 units, and my leader's in one of those stacks. But I could have set it up so that the leader was with 1 big infantry, and they'd be on a slightly worse table, but with the advantages for that, so they have some capability to cause issues. The Union is actually doing diversionary attacks, just get themselves into the position. They're not going to be allowed to move into either of these spaces, but those aren't spaces I really want to move into. And we'll see what we time up with. One thing is, I have a leader in both cases. If I'm facing Longstreet, I'm going to have a leader penalty in one of the 2 positions. Doesn't matter which one. If I'm facing Magruder, this lineup would be a success for me. But otherwise, I'm counting on, I'm only facing one of the Confederate core-like structures, to call them that. Totally misread the situation. This is what happens because I leave the game. The Union actually was ahead in victory points by a fair number, and they caused a casualty here by doing the diversionary attacks. Yeah, the Confederates, well, so the question is, do I want to risk Richmond on more aggressive tactics as the Confederates? And I'm perfectly fine with this, with what I did in terms of the Confederates falling back on Richmond and saying, you know what, we're not getting the traction we need here. Maybe the Union will screw up. Instead of, hey, we can win no matter what. We can't win no matter what. Indeed, the Union could have played a more conservative strategy at this point rather than the Confederates and still get a win. But, Richmond calls. So I'm actually absolutely fine with making the decisions that I made for completely the wrong reasons. I lost track of what the victory points were. But anyway, the diversionary attack worked rather well because it allowed the Union to get its firepower in play, even though Jackson had an advantage. Shitty die roll for the Confederates. Stuff happens. The wing ends up as a draw. Points were 19 to 18, which with the diversionary put us here and here. Union had a leadership advantage, both on the same table, just came down to a die roll. Using the diversionary attack, I take the CIC basically out of play because it's only a 1 against the stand. Now, the Confederates could counterattack, but then they lose the one thing they have, the defensive edge on the CIC, right? And so that worked for as a 1-to-1 with a shift down. Well, a 1's not going to do it. And this is the problem. The Confederates can't push this up, and they don't have enough troops that it makes sense to do so. And that'll push us to the next turn. And I honestly think this is close to over, but I may manage to pull something out of my ass. Maybe, maybe an assault on one of these. Those might be weaker than they look, but what do I do? If the Union pulls out of here, they're back 5 victory points. So I've got to keep some force, and that could just be Cook's Cav there, somewhere kicking around in the back rows. But I could actually swap out the quality of units. Porter's force is quite good, but it's taken a lot of damage. The units that haven't taken damage are led by horrendous leaders, and I'm not really thrilled with using them. I think we're going to end up with sort of a stalemate down there, where the Union victory points end up giving them the edge, but we'll see. Well, the rebels pulled Jackson down, otherwise not much of anything. Good weather again. Let's see what the Union does. First question, of course, is how much do we have? And it's going to be quite a bit, four actions. So I could continue fighting here. And maybe to do something else, but the something else is the hard part. I mean, what do? I can shift Porter over, and then I have this defensive river line, but that doesn't really give me any other control on anything. However, it prevents the Confederates from getting 5 more victory points, and that 5 victory points will put them within 2 points of the Union. So I don't want to give the Confederates too much. I want to keep this vice on Richmond as much as I can, if I make it through the game without basically falling back, I've done something not McClellan-like, but on the other hand, I also have put myself in a position where Richmond continues to be threatened. There is another Union Corps back there, the First Corps, that McClellan has pulled out of range because of fear of Jackson and other things going on. Fighting here at 4 Mile Church, the Union liked the diversionary attack last time. Well, it didn't work out this time very well. They took 3 losses and caused absolutely no casualties, which is converting that victory point table. a little bit. The Confederates still have a little ways to gain. Other than that, I don't think anything of excitement happened. I think we just pushed to the next turn. One reason to keep fighting is the capability to move out of that space. So for example, if I wanted to coordinate an attack into something like this. So all I actually had to activate were these 2 units and this for 2 more, so that's my 4. As we enter July 1st, the rain started again. There's no modifier at this point in the game. But that opens up some interesting problems. The Union can cross the bridges this turn, but next turn they will not be able to. So I have options. If I really want to get Porter out of here for some reason, I can force march across. But what I can't do is, count on being able to kind of outflank this way very easily, although that was kind of where I was looking at going. Although, again, although he can be in command, he can't actually do any attacks. So, like, just a single Confederate unit here would prevent me from crossing that river effectively. McClellan's too far away is essentially the problem. The other side of it, although he could move into position to support an attack into here, McClellan's not going to be able to get all the way over there easily. Okay, that's one side of it. But we're looking at the Confederates here, just taking into account what the Union might do. Jackson could come storming across into here, but this is that kind of swampy river or stream banks. I'd rather not fight through that, but what I could do is move Magruder into here, shift Jackson down, and maybe move a Magruder unit, although I don't really like that, into here to cover, or maybe leave some of Jackson there. He's got a unit that could use some straggler recovery, which, especially if I leave a cav there, I think it could recover completely. It could get 2 back. That's all Winder's division has. But that's a big part of his force. However, if I'm just trying to defend, I might be able to bust my way through and cause the Union some serious problems. And because the river is going to be troublesome, maybe this is the time. Of course, here's the thing. I don't think the Union command restrictions, the regular command restrictions, I think prevent a forced march. I have to look that up. Because the thing is, I will have to cover this if I'm going to do that. Because otherwise the Union can just slide in there anyway, if they can force march. There is a restriction. It's not the command restrictions. It's actually crossing a river. You can't force march to cross the river. So I can't get the jump on him to get across that river quickly, which gives me a little bit of breathing space. They're going to try to punch through at 7 Pines. Defensible terrain, entrenched. The Union only set up 1 wing. The Confederates decide to set up 2. That gives them a little bit of advantage in terms of being able to fire without firing back, but it actually hurts them on the CIC table. It might not be the wisest thing. One of the reasons I'm doing that is I have my 2 cav with me, so I think it's going to work out better that way. We'll see how it ends up. With the rain, attack orders to give myself better rolls. I don't think the Union's going to counterattack when they're in entrenchments. They're not going to give that in the defensive terrain up, right? So it pretty much can limit the combat intensity chart to not doing any damage to me. However, firepower chart, both sides did damage. You can see I kind of won the bullseye, or won the prize here. I'm only facing, one brigade out of the entire, or 1 division out of the, one division out of the corps. But first loss doesn't count. Very unlikely I'm going to do any damage with this. This one didn't manage to do damage, got a bad roll. So I didn't even break even. I took damage. But what I did do is I'm in an area that only has 10 strength points. On the troop density chart, I could leave that area. So I'm going to be very flexible, assuming that the Union doesn't throw more troops in, which they can. And oops, It's just a stand order. And no matter what, I also have the flexibility, to at least shift along my line as long as I'm not getting closer to there. So I'm not stuck in this space at the end of this combat. So it's not a terrible thing, but I did lose a victory point off of it in net, and that's not too great. And now it's over to the Union side. Well, I could have built my bridge here and thrown my cav over the river, but instead I probed into here, found there was nothing, destroyed the defenses there. I'm not going to be able to get through here to get enough points to be worth it, but I can put pressure on the Richmond area and cause problems to the whole Confederate line by going up this way. So that seems not unreasonable. Porter, I mean, I have tons of command points left, but I like where he is. I can't really see moving him at this point. But this Cav is kind of independent. It's running around and it's going to try to see, hey, can I threaten Richmond and force the Confederates to try to screen it? Because with the Major River shot, I can just, kind of go around here and there's no harm. Can't attack, but that's okay. I can probe and stuff. Or it could be dummy. It's not, but it could be. Here, it was absolutely vital that I throw more troops in, or else the Confederates can just push through. That's something I don't want to have happen. They could end up cutting off, Fair Oaks. Don't want that happening at all. And also leaving Porter out of command. That would just be disastrous. I could lose the game by losing this space, conceivably. However, what that means is I can't move too much of my stuff. I ended up weakening this. I'm going to do another round of battle here. It's not going very well, but hey, it's rainy, so I can up the firepower table a little bit. Went particularly poorly for the Union. They took 2 losses on each of their sides to 1 from the Confederates. This was just die rolls on the fire combat table. The CIC, I was able to negate that. Generally, as the attacker, that's not a bad choice unless you have really good odds. Strength-wise, there's still plenty on both sides. Nobody's going to be pushing out of there, but the Union gets to keep the ability to pull back. The problem is they have to cover both these spaces if they pull back, so they're not gaining, a more cohesive line. And in fact, they might be opening something up they don't want to open, which is a problem. Yeah, so that was a gain of 2 victory points for the Confederates, and you can see it's getting a little closer, but this is scary. Basically, the question comes down to, can the Confederates, break this or cause some other issue? Maybe, pushing. I think there's Jackson in here now, isn't it? I don't remember. They may make a push all along the front and just try to fling the Union back. Not sure. Return of rain, that buys me some more respite from Porter back here, which at least one more turn that he's not coming across. That means I'm pretty safe leaving this close to empty. There were 2 options. I could leave this empty and charge in across here. Actually, it would have been Jackson coming in there, move forces down to cover here. The disadvantage to that is I have one of Jackson's units, which doesn't want to cross the river anyway, that's sitting here that wants to recover. So if I'm doing that, this seems like the safer attack overall. However, there's a much better chance there's very little here, and I could just overload the Union line to the point where they can't move units quickly enough without forced marching or something, which has its own issues. In fact, can't be done cutting through the Confederate units, so it's not a big deal. It's not an issue anyway. There'd basically be no way to prevent the Union or the Confederates from pushing through here. What does it mean if they push through there? Well, yeah, that's kind of the problem. That doesn't get them anything. That gets them behind the enemy lines, out of command, unable to do shit. That's not a good position to be in this system. So much better to try to break the line somewhere. And I'm more likely to break the line here than force my way through with any advantage. If the rivers were open, yeah, maybe I could, trace my big line of command all the way around the board. There's nothing in the way. transporter can't cover the whole river. Although he might want to spread out and do that. That would not have been a bad choice last turn, is to cordon the river and just say, you know what, the whole north is ours. But no. So these guys will continue to attack. These guys will attack. Between the two of them, I have real stuff here. Now, I tried to move these, and I know I'm facing more than 12 strength points, but I don't know how much more. And then I'm also launching an attack into here. That cav probably wants to withdraw before combat. Cavalry is halved, even with all the benefits of the rough terrain. You know, it did its damage taking the guns out and presenting a threat that opens up. These guys had to move down further from Richmond, which means if the Union does get a breakthrough somewhere, that puts Richmond much more in danger than if they were sitting here where they could just jump back in. I got hard choices here at Seven Pines. I chose to attack. The Union has split itself up into two wings. I'm not sure what I'm doing with the Confederates. If I put it all in one wing, I can get a higher ratio on that CIC table. But it means I get less firepower. On the other hand, each of these gets to reduce damage. But, you know, I'm going to get shot at by both of these. I think I'm better off splitting up my forces, even if it means I'm at a command disadvantage. Things did not go well. This is not there. I forgot about the entrenchments. He didn't take any damage whatsoever. Confederates took 2 losses for being in 2 positions. Well, having 2 positions fire at them, basically. So no matter what, they were in trouble. I don't think the Confederates want to stick around there any longer. You know, when they hit the one, they had a chance of doing damage at this point. They're really rolling, trying to get ones. That's the only way that they can hurt the Union. And so you can see Union victory points growing. We didn't make our breakthrough. We should have gotten out of there, maybe probed up into here or something. That would have been allowable. But what we did not work well at all. However, we wanted to stay in contact with these guys for whatever reason. And we'll go to the battle there, see if the Confederates can punch through. I highly doubt it. The game is not one in which you just break a unit in a half day's fighting, or a position in a half day's fighting, unless you have really overwhelming odds in that portion of the battlefield. Notable thing. So first of all, because of the entrenchment, the Union did want to be in two lines no matter what, because they spread out the damage that way and are able to absorb more losses in the entrenchments. But they had to, basically, because they had units from 2 different corps in place. And things do not go well for them here at the White's Tavern. Confederates spread out into 2 line positions, but that's always dangerous for the Confederates. They have 1/3 chance that they don't get 2 lines into play. And one of them didn't come, which meant they were outnumbered. They chased some dummies that were positioned here to make the Union look scarier. We ended up doing 2 casualties to the Confederates and none to the Union. However, well, there's 14 strength points there. I believe it is not just infantry that counts. Yeah, it's any strength points, I think. I can look that up. But this is defensible terrain, so the Union's got enough forces to prevent the Confederates from pushing through here. So as it stands, the couple places where the Confederates got units mobilized, they're not going to be able to just push through or do anything too crazy. However, they can push this way as much as they like, because the defensible terrain, I'm sorry, the defensive, the troop density rules take something into account that I don't really like, which is they make the assumption that your line is basically based on your home area. Well, the Union home area here, maybe, but still, what it really comes down to is it's the fact that you're breaking the line that's the issue. And I think that rule, I'm not quite sure how to write it so that it would be revised, so that it would make sense, but it's the fact that this is a solid line that's the reason you can't get through it, that you can't just pass by. In some situations, though, that wouldn't make as much sense. It's more a matter of the enemy would be able to screen you from their home area more. So I understand why they do it the way they do it. I just feel a little iffy. It feels like locally here we've got a different geography than the consideration of where the home area is. Whereas if we were playing, without forming these major lines, and most of the games that I've seen of this, you don't see these big, lines forming like this around Richmond. The fact that there's entrenchments, the fact that there's a key location not far away, all that has changed the nature of the battle from what normally would be happening in the operational series, where you're really just trying to block the enemy from a certain direction of movement. Well, that direction of movement is really anything in this direction, not towards this in particular. And I can't think of a way to express that. Anyway, on to the Union side. And this continues to be an attritional fight here against Longstreet. Back here, the Union gets to keep its mobility. It's just a draw. 2 losses on both sides. Victory points assigned. The one problem for the Union with this, with trading off here, which is not at all bad if they're attacking, but they have slightly better numbers. You can see they're showing up with somewhat more firepower. They have decent enough leadership with 2 leaders there that have quality. Longstreet's only 1. They basically split the difference there. So it's pretty much an even battle. The CIC advantage for the terrain is negated by the fact that really the Confederates can only pick one thing. They're stuck with stand, which means the Union always gets to pick. And technically, no, they're not stuck with stand, but the other choices are horrible. Withdraw means they leave the space, which they don't want to do. And counterattack means they lose the defensive benefit, which they don't want to do. So no matter what, the CIC table pretty much defines what they're going to do, and therefore the Union can actually decide what the combat intensity level is going to be. The only thing they don't know is absolutely what the ratio is going to be. The Confederates could do something like stack one side and cause both sides more losses by doing that. They might get an advantage out of that, but trying to manipulate the CIC in that manner doesn't seem terribly valuable. So then it comes down to fire combat. The Union has a slight advantage there, perhaps, because they have more firepower. But their disadvantage is their units are smaller, and some of them are beginning to wear out. Some of them are beginning to get close to their level, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He's got 2 more losses. I don't know. This guy can only take 1 more loss. If he takes another one, he loses combat effectiveness. Porter's Corps is weaker than most. So, that's the one factor, is once units start becoming unable to stand in the line, you can't have them as the whole line or they will break. So that is a factor. Ineffective units, become a problem. And once the whole army is kind of ineffective, well, it really can't do anything either way. Anyway, I'm willing, the game's almost over. The victory point spread is fair. 1, 2, 3 victory point difference. The Union could choose not to attack, but I don't know. It's kind of hard not to attack when you're in a position like this. It just feels like you have to threaten things. They're not taking any casualties. They're not taking any losses victory point wise from it, but they might. And their line is too weak down here. That's the problem. But there's also really strong reasons to make sure that I leave a unit back north of the Chickahominy. This makes it there next turn. Richmond's in danger, so the Confederates are going to have to do something about that. So there you have it. This is very much not a game to play with a rules lawyer. I know people kind of harsh on the CWB series or whatever because of interpretations of commands and all that, but this is so much potentially worse. So one quick example. The Union has the ability to build, both sides have the ability to build bridges. The bridges get swept away on a rain turn. There's no prohibition in the rulebook from building bridges, on the turn after a rain turn. There's no prohibition in the rulebook from building bridges on the turn after a rain turn when they would be swept away. It's that kind of thing that I could see somebody saying, well, if they left that out, they must have done it for a reason. No, this rulebook is very much, a rough draft in some ways. I mean, it's beyond that. And you can use some sense to resolve issues, but if you don't use sense to resolve issues, you come up with stupid arguments that just don't make sense. And you can kind of support them with, well, it's not actually prohibited by the rules, and it seems to imply you can. No, you can't, Anyway. All right. Given how far we got, it looks like I'm probably going to take tonight off because I don't want to finish the game up tonight, but I'll probably finish it up tomorrow. So the weather cleared, but the bridges are still out for this turn. Next turn they're open though, and that's a big deal because 5th Corps could do something, conceivably. Not a lot, but something. Next turn's the last turn of the game though, so it's not going to make it to Richmond. And, other than trying to assess the board situation, which I think is of value, there's not a lot I can do. I should hide these. The Confederates have slid forces into play here. Let me make sure I have someone here. Yeah, I moved Winder there. Good. Have slid their forces up from 7 Pines, and I'm going to continue the attack here. I like the idea of the combined being close to each other, but this was getting strong enough that I clearly wasn't going to be able to do anything impressive. If I can break through here, maybe something interesting, is happening. So we're going ahead with that. Elsewhere, well, we're using our dummies to try to confuse the situation, but the truth is we're trying to cover Richmond so that Cav can't just slide in there and do some damage. Battle down here not going well for the Confederates. The CIC hurt them. Without the rain, it didn't reduce the combat intensity level, but it's still only 1. But the problem is I was at 1 to 2, not the 1 to 1 I was hoping for. So I ended up dropping down, taking a hit from each. I did do one hit during fire combat. Crappies. Yeah, the Union missed on the second fire combat that I shouldn't have made over here, but that's okay. So yeah, another victory point for the Union essentially. However, we're still big enough. Yeah, we're still big enough that the Confederates aren't able to push through and just kind of ignore the frontage. Not that it matters too much. I'd probably be going this way, not that way, but we're not sure. It goes down good here, hitting the entrenchments at Fair Oak Station. Dropped the counter in the wrong place. Some of the areas, sometimes it's hard for me to see the areas. I really find the graphics of these maps very, very confusing and very difficult to discern what's going on. They're kind of pretty, I guess, in some sort of colored pencil 7 or 8 year old type of way, but I have never been all that fond of them, and they're really hard to read. So, hitting the entrenchments here, we did a total of 1 to the Union and took 4 ourselves. Just not good at all. How did we take so much? Yeah, that's a good question. I think I took 1 extra for the Confederates that I shouldn't have. I think I rolled firepower on this where I shouldn't have. So I'll remove 1 of those losses. Though the Union force is too small to prevent the Confederates from moving any which way they like, so I could actually go back to 7 Pines if I wanted to. Obviously, I can go almost anywhere else. I could go to Savage Station, but that doesn't look recommended. Although I would technically be able to trace a line of command somehow or another because the bridge will be, fixed. So yeah, the Union's not able to cordon the line yet. Porter might want to do that. That might be the best thing he can do. However, that's an expensive thing to do, and I actually can't even command him because I do not have a legitimate line of communications going back. McClellan has an interesting situation here. I got these guys that I could actually move out of here. These things, they're pretty much fixed. The Cav probed, and I found, hey, Richmond's open. Well, I could do something. I can move to here with one or both of these, if that's open. If I try to force march, I can find out if that's empty and pin a possible Confederate force here that won't be able to protect Richmond. How much is it worth it? Not much, because I can't pin this easily. I can move, my other force can't move in here because that's closer. None of these could move in there. So I'm kind of looking at, you know what, the game is really over here. The Union is not going to get close, significantly closer to Richmond. I could give up this terrain and go into here and try to pin, try to clear that space, but then that weakens my positioning here. I think that's what I'm going to do, though, and just not launch an attack this time, and just try to keep putting the squeeze onto the Confederate position. Overall, I think that's for the best. The other option would be to fall back, but the problem with falling back is it would uncover this. I've got my engineers there. I don't think they're worth a victory point, but I built the pontoon bridge, and you can see the Cav went across that. But I didn't want to move the boats through here because there's a chance I might sink a boat, and shelling isn't going to get me a lot of points for one turn or 2 turns or whatever. Each boat that I sink is worth 3 points. So let's take a quick look at this. The river obstacle table, 1/3 of my boats on average will be sunk by going through there. Remember, I've cleared both the batteries now. And I think it's 1 victory point per turn if I get here. So it's not a good trade-off. I can't just clear this by taking it. So there's really not a lot there. What I could do is I could move the boats here in case there's an enemy force there, and position myself further. The problem with that is I kind of want to keep a boat here in order to help defend this, even though it doesn't matter because I don't have anything that can fight there. But just to, well, actually it doesn't matter if I'm going to move in there. So yeah, let's launch the attack. The Rebs had nothing there. I'm not launching any other attacks, in particular here. My odds aren't that good. I'm hoping to really just have more of a position so that at the end of the game I can say, hey look, the Union not only won on victory points, but they're actually in a pretty good position for threatening Richmond. Jackson has been pushed down with the rest of the forces. The Union Army, the Potomac, is in place for the most part to conduct the siege. I could bring the First Corps down under this circumstance. So, overall, my argument is McClellan's doing damn well here, given the position he was in at the beginning of the scenario. Even though I shifted my base, I'm still keeping the pressure on Richmond. It's one of the things I noticed with the CWV game, at least this one, it gives you a really good reason to shift your headquarters. But in neither game does it give you a good reason to say, yeah, I'm done. I think the situation just doesn't warrant McClellan withdrawing. And a lot of that's, he withdrew because he thought he was outnumbered. He wasn't. And so by knowing the troop strengths, even though you shift your base, which is wise, you still end up doing things that aren't going to be the historical situation just because you're not as surprised as McClellan. At least with the CWB game, there's the possibility of those extra Confederate troops, at least some of them, being in place. Now there is in this too, there's optional rules to have some additional forces in place. Not as many as McClellan thought there were, but some of the forces further west could have come into the battle. But likewise, the First Corps could be involved in the battle. But unlike CWB, you don't have sort of a hidden options pick. You could bake that into this, but again, you know, I'm not really sure why I'm playing things out. I don't really think the Confederates see that they can do anything of value. All they're going to do is cover Richmond and pull forces back where they can, which honestly is from the front lines, and reorganize. The Union's not going to be able to take anything. I'm going to call it here. I just don't see the reason of going through the last couple moments of the battle. You know, the Union's going to be able to get here. It's going to be putting a real noose around Richmond, especially since I've made it across the river. But yeah, I think this is the end of the battle. It does allow you effectively. I mean, why play out the last turn when you can picture exactly what's going to happen? Nobody's going to be fighting particularly. It's not going to help anyone. Attack is expensive in this game, so unless you're gaining ground from it that you can't gain otherwise, it doesn't make much sense. But yeah, I mean, what I'm looking at for the Confederate turn is something kind of like this happening. These guys probably falling back. There's no reason to hold that territory, but holding these strong points is really important. I lost one of them. I don't want to lose both of them. But overall, this is not good. And, you know, I mean, Porter, conceivably, if First Corps comes down, we're in a lot of trouble as the Confederates, you know. And this looks a lot worse to me than the victory point spread that we're looking at. But again, I'm not playing, you know, to McClellan's strengths in this. The Union pressed the attack on Richmond harder than they perhaps should have, just to meet, you know, what's going on. So throw it as a dice roll either way. What about the fact that this game uses a slightly different, or uses a significantly different scale than most of the games in the series? It seems to still pretty much work. I felt a little funny about only one round of combat. I feel like I have less fun. And yes, there is a slight difference, but it just feels less interesting than the means of having a reserve in the back, seeing what happens and maybe throwing in an extra couple strength points into the one battle that you lost a strength point you weren't counting on or whatever. On the other hand, reserves aren't terribly important in this. Usually you want to be at least at the front of a chart, but maybe even bigger than that, because in the end you're going to be working off combat odds on the CIC. The other thing different from Mississippi Fortress is we had to deal with the actual lines of communication, and we added optional rules from the second edition here, which covered the troop density, which I don't know why I'm pointing there. It's not there. And something else. Troop density, which prevents you from just passing through the enemy line, which makes a lot of sense to me. And what's the other optional rule? I can't remember things. And yeah, I'm feeling a little stupid from my sickness, but there's the troop density. Something to do with combat, maybe? I feel so lost. There's an optional rule here, and I don't remember what the fuck it is. Do I have another chart? The optional weather. We play with that in the other one. I gotta look. The other rule was general retreat, which allows you to... Both of them have to do with pinning units. The troop density makes it harder to push through the enemy line. The general retreat makes it easier to say, you know what, let me out of there. The only problem is it's your entire army that has to retreat. You can't do like, let's retreat this wing in under a general retreat. I'm sure there are, you know, scenarios that could happen. I haven't got my counters clipped for Grant Takes Command, so we're not going to go to this one next, but that's okay because since it's beyond the North Anna or whatever, I think marching through Georgia is fine, and I'll do something or maybe a couple somethings in between in those. But other than that, this one's going up. No reason to play out that last turn. It's not going to change the numbers, you know. The Confederates are a good 10 points behind. They are not going to gain that kind of ground if they're the attackers, and there's no reason for the Union to try to hurt themselves on the Confederates. And they've set themselves up in such a way that the Confederates really have to fall back on Richmond with some forces. Not much, like the garrison would be enough to protect Richmond, but it's kind of a, you know, I don't really want to stand here in the trench lines and keep fighting there. I'm losing troops there. There's no reason to be there. Let's loosen my troops up. Yes, the Union could come in and pin them, but whatever. All right, up she goes.